Jesus, thank you so much for this day. Thank you so much for bringing us here, that we can come here and worship you freely and in the open. Thank you that we can come here and listen to your words and what you have for us, that we can open your book and read what you have to say to us. Thank you so much for all that you're going to do in this place. In your name, in Jesus' name, amen. Amen. This was one of the scriptures that was preached at one of the church camps, and it stuck with me because it's one thing. It's one thing. Jesus could have picked anything to choose from in all of creation and all of time, and he picked one thing. He said the kingdom of heaven is like unto a pearl. One pearl. And it's so great of a thing that you could sell all that you have and to buy it, and you would still be okay with that. It's not something that you go into. A lot of people, they go into one of the greatest causes of depression for young adults is when they go in to make big purchases and they regret it. They've come up with an entire name for it, and it's got its own sect in depression for the psychologist, because they go in and they make a life-changing decision with money or finances and they regret it. When they buy a new car and then it breaks down, when they buy a house and they didn't really need it, or they can't handle the payments. This man, Jesus says, this man buys a great pearl and he never regrets it. That's what the kingdom of heaven is like. I'd like to ask you a question. Everyone could close your eyes and try to picture the answer. What do you give Jesus? What is the thing that you give Jesus? You can open your eyes. I don't know what you pictured, but when I pictured it, I pictured a list of things, and it was like finances. Do I give Jesus finances? And then I went, I checked it off the list. I said, yeah, I give in offerings. I give whenever I make money. I give to Jesus every time that I think about it. I give to Jesus. I got that one. And then I look and it says, do I give time to Jesus? Yeah, I've started giving time. Do I give myself to Jesus? Do I give thoughts? Do I give my energy? Do I give my emotions? These are things that we start thinking about when we say, what do you give Jesus? It's a list. A list of all these things that we could possibly give to Jesus. I don't know if you pictured anything. Maybe you pictured an offering plate. Maybe you pictured what your check that comes in the mail. Maybe you pictured you in service when you're praying and worshiping. Why do we think of this list? Why instead don't we say one thing? Why don't we go, what can I give to Jesus? And we only have one box that we can check. We shouldn't have to have a long list. We shouldn't have to think of all the things that we could possibly give. Why don't we just look at ourselves and say, Jesus, have me. Have me. Take me. Use me to whatever you'd have me to do. Because there doesn't need to be a whole list of stuff that I have to go through and make sure that I'm giving whenever I give all to Jesus. That's my message today.
Amen.
Just one word is all.
That's right.
See, this is something, I mean, I might be up here talking, but Jesus preached it this hard at me whenever I was studying. This is something that I struggle with myself. We sing the song, I surrender all. I surrender all to you, Jesus. I surrender all. But when was the last time we walked away from a service putting everything in the offering plate and had to skip the next meal instead of going out to eat? When was the last time that we worshiped with everything that we had and we didn't do it? We couldn't think of any way more to worship. I can't remember the last day that I didn't have anything to do, so I woke up and I did nothing but prayed and read my Bible. I can't remember just me doing a lot of the stuff that well, why don't I do? Why don't I do some of this stuff? When was the last time when you got a number in your head of an offering to give that you said, maybe I could do a little bit less than that, and it would still be a sacrifice, but I could do a little bit less? That one hit me hard. The Spirit's asking too much of me. I can't put $40 in. I have to eat later. $20 is still a sacrifice. But is that surrendering at all? I'd like to turn to John 3:16. We all know it, probably, and we all have quoted it probably a bunch of times. We've heard it quoted in a bunch of different ways. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. This is a powerful statement of somebody who gave it all. Not for themselves. Jesus, God himself, came down to earth and gave everything. He didn't have much. If you read the scriptures and throughout Jesus' ministry, he borrowed a lot of things. He didn't always have money. He had money that was given to him. He had food that was given to him, shelter. He didn't have a house. He walked and he told his disciples, I don't have any place to stay. We don't know where we're going to stay. We're going to get food. People will give us food. We'll have food. He didn't, but one thing he did have was his life. And he gave it to us.
That's right.
He said, those people are worth giving it all. Another thing that hit me really hard was the cross. It was probably the most horrific thing to watch. There was a man on a tree who suffocated. He was hanging there, open, wounded, and he did it freely. For us, it was the most horrific thing to watch, but yet it's one of the most beautiful things that has ever happened in all of history. We think about salvation and we remember that Jesus died for us, and that cost was so costly. Jesus gave everything that he had. His whole life was everything he had and everything that he owned, and he gave it to us. Such a costly price, such a beautiful thing to remember, and such a crazy thing to think about, that he would do that. They say that a good leader leads by example. If we're to give everything, and we're supposed to follow Jesus, then he led it by example. That cross, that price that he paid, was the greatest example any of us could ever be shown. We might not be there to see it. There was those who did, and they wrote it down for us to witness. Every time we open our Bibles, we can witness the price that Jesus paid. We can understand that he was not afraid to give an example of giving it all. Now, I'm not asking anybody to go and be martyrs right now, but are we giving it all? Are we giving everything? Could there be more? Abraham had a son, and he was going to sacrifice it because Jesus said to. This son was everything. If you look in the scriptures, he was promised. He had a promise on his life. He had a blessing on his life. And Isaac was that blessing. Yes. When Isaac was born, he became that blessing. He became the promise. He became his only son. Right. And he was going to sacrifice it all. Jesus said, you have to sacrifice it all. He made a way that not to happen. But Abraham was willing to sacrifice it all. What does that mean for us? What does that mean for us? Does God really expect everything from us? He's not a halfway God. He doesn't halfway do anything. He created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. He didn't halfway create the world and let it create itself the rest of the way. He did the whole thing, and he's not a halfway God.
That's right.
Right.
He said, I would rather you be hot or cold. If you're lukewarm, I'll spew you out of my mouth. He's not halfway.
Right. Yes, he did.
The lines of gray are made up. How are we to love? Scripture says, love with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. We're supposed to love with all of us. We're supposed to do everything with all of us. If you think I've just picked a few of these examples, what about the woman who put in her last 2 shekels? She gave it all. Jesus gave it all. And God is amazing and powerful and awesome. And he himself gave it all to show us an example. Amen. 1 Kings 18:38 is the next scripture. Just how all God is one of my favorite stories in the book. After Elijah makes this, he says, let the God who is God answer by fire. He went and he whetted his sacrifice. He made a sacrifice. He built a sacrifice. We heard it preached on Sunday. He built this sacrifice and then he drenched it in barrels of water. Barrels. And God answered with all. He said, the fire came down and it consumed the burnt sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. It ate up all of it. God wasn't satisfied with just the sacrifice. He wasn't satisfied with the sacrifice and the wood. Not even the wood and getting rid of all the water. He wanted all of it. He wanted all of it. If you can remember the story of Gideon, after the main part, after they broke their pitchers, after they shouted and screamed and shined their lights, they started killing each other. But God said, that's not good enough. They started running. The people that survived, they started running. But God was like, that's not good enough. You go after them. You catch them and you get them all. I don't want any of them to stand. When did Saul start losing his grace? When he didn't kill all the people he was supposed to. He didn't do all that he was asked. He saved the good sheep, the good flock, and the king. We need to give all. I'd like to ask you to do something to prove a point. Is everybody awake?
Amen.
When we scream, I love Jesus. Let's give it a test round real quick. I love Jesus.
I love Jesus.
Let's do it again.
I love Jesus.
Brother Larry, what did you say?
I love Jesus.
Landon, what did you say? Richard, what did you say?
I love Jesus.
He didn't say I love Jesus. Did you hear him say I hug Jesus? David, did you hear Richard say I hug Jesus? You heard him? Katie, did you hear him say I hug Jesus?
What?
See, the point I want to make here is that when one of us messes up, see, so far I've been talking about this hard, but I want you to realize when you mess up, and all of us are doing worship, all of us are praying, all of us are giving something, when one of us messes up, when one of us doesn't say the right thing, when one of us falls away a little bit, the rest of us are there. It's not everybody has to look at him and say, oh, you did something different. We're all there to help him.
That's right.
So next time we can go, hey, Richard, it's I love Jesus. You don't have to, the person across the room may not hear it. Maybe Sister Katie right next to him hears him and says, hey, this is something that we can do better. It's I love Jesus. It's I love Jesus. You don't have to have the person across the room notice you to get help. We have people around us.
Right.
And God kind of made this a secret plan, he codenamed the plan for this kind of thing, CHURCH. I'm going to tell you what that is. Jesus said, I've got a plan to help you guys so you don't fall away. And code name is church. Church. He made the church so that we can call on the person next to us and they can help us along with this.
Right.
See, when you're doing all you can and it's not good enough, then the person next to you can help you get to that next level.
That's right.
When you're doing all you know how to do and all doesn't seem good enough, the person to your left and right can say, hey, I got you. We can do all of this together.
Amen.
Has anybody ever played in an orchestra?
Nope.
Have you watched an orchestra? And when there's a lot of people and one person makes a mistake, you don't hear it because there's a bunch of other instruments. There's a bunch of other instruments playing the same song, and one person makes a mistake, you probably wouldn't hear it. But the person next to them, they heard it. When I played in an orchestra, the person next to me, when they made a mistake, I heard it. When I made a mistake, they heard me. But when I fall off, I don't look at the person next to me and say, hey, where are you at? Where are you at? I'm lost. Where are you at? Because the person next to me is probably not playing the same part. See, if I played second trumpet, the person next to me is playing first trumpet, we're not playing the same part. He could be higher or lower. He could be playing faster rhythm and I could be playing slower. The person next to me is not always at the same place I am. We're playing the same song, yes, but they're not always in the same place that I am. See, you might be able to figure out where you are a little bit, get help from your neighbor a little bit.
Right.
But in an orchestra, when you get lost, when you are totally lost and the person next to you looks over and says, I don't know. That's a pretty scary thing when you're playing and you're in the middle of a third page and the person next to you is on the fifth page and you're like, where are you at? And they're like, I mean, it's scary. But when I'm lost, when another person in the orchestra is lost, they don't look at the person next to them. They look at the front. Because where the front is where the conductor's at. That's where the conductor's at. That's where your pastor's at. He's at the front. He's leading. He doesn't ask you to do something that he's not going to do himself. He doesn't ask you to play an instrument. When you try to become a maestro and you try to lead an orchestra, you have to know to play all the rest of the instruments. Because they won't let you do it unless you know how to play the rest of the instruments. Even if you learn how to a little bit. Because the person right there needs to be able to say, hey, what do I do? And you're supposed to be able to know. I'm almost done, I promise. I'm on the last leg. I'd like to go back to the pearl of great price. This man gave it all for this one thing. He gave it all for this one thing. And this one thing became his all. This pearl, the kingdom of heaven, became his all. When all of us start doing what we can, when we do all we can, we then realize that all of us need to be doing all we can. I can't do in a church, I can't do all I can. And you have to do all you can. And you have to do all you can. You have to do all you can, because when we all do all we can, it's something totally different.
That's right.
It's something totally different. We go to a next level. I'd like to do the same thing we did a little bit ago. But Richard, can you say, I love Jesus with us? We all can say, I love Jesus. You ready? 1, 2, 3.
I love Jesus.
See, that's something called unity. When we all pull it together. When we all become the all. It looks different when all of us do all that we can. But all doesn't start when we're all together. All starts when we're all by ourselves. When we're at home alone practicing. A musician goes home, they play in an orchestra, it sounds great, but what happened before that time when they were all playing together? Before that time, they spent hours practicing. For us, it looks a little bit different. Us, it looks like opening our Bible. It looks like talking with God. It looks like worshiping and praising. You don't have to do that with music. You don't have to do that with anybody else around. Just Jesus. I'm so thankful for the church. A lot of people get caught up in different things about the church. They don't like this, they don't like that. But the church is God's plan so that we all can be together.
That's right.
If we can all stand. I told you I was at the end. This is Neese. I'd like you to look to your neighbor and ask them, is this all? Look at your other neighbor and say, is this all?
Is this all?
Do we look around, we could say, is this all you're going to do? You're going to come to church and is this all? That's all you're going to put in the offering plate? Is that all? You might look around and see somebody, is this all? But it doesn't start there. It's part of it. It's part of it. But if we could all look at our hands, look down at our hands and ourselves, and we ask the same question with all the meaning that we can ask. Is this all? Is this all I can do? Is this all that I'm capable of? Am I doing all that I can? Is there nothing I can do more? We come to the altar and pray. Ask the Lord if this is all that I can do. If this is all I am. If this is all I've been given and this is all that you have for me.